Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday sew along. Before we get started, I did want to share with you there is a class on Saturday. It is geared for beginners, but anybody could have fun doing it. It's a simple project out of the Quilts in a Jiffy book. This series of books are all quilts that are made out of 3 1-yard cuts of fabric. So you can feature a fun fabric that you want to highlight. And Tony's going to hold up a quilt because that's the, let me get to the right camera so you can see it. That's the project. It's called Wandering Way. And the class is $60. That includes the book, your fabric that you get to choose off the shelves, and the instructions. So we're going to cover precise cutting, proper piecing, and proper pressing. So if you have a desire to a quick little project, this might be the class for you. Or if you have a friend that's been wanting to learn to quilt, this is a good way for them to learn. So they'll need to contact me soon because as of right now, we don't have enough for the class to make, but we do have some people in the class and we've got room for more. So contact us at the shop. You can call the number that's on the screen above my head. So right now, and Pamela asked, will you get the parroting book? I'm not sure what you mean. If it's a book in this series, we can get it. We have several of the titles, but you'll just have to send us an email with the exact title of the one you're wanting. Anything that's available from Checker Distributor, we can get. That's generally where we get our books and patterns from, so that, patriotic. So I'll have to look. The quilt we did, the Wandering Ways quilt, you can make it patriotic just by changing the color of the fabric. And we're going to talk a little bit about where you place the fabric that you've chosen, how it affects the looks of the project. So that is an option for you as well. So tonight's block is called, oh my goodness, Stormy Chain. And there's the block. Let me move it over so you can actually see the whole block. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So this block includes some 4 patches in the corners, in the center, and then a double 4 patch where you've taken 2 smaller 4 patches and some plain squares to make a double 4 patch. Then on the sides, we've used the diamond Rects tool to make that unit. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but let's talk about the 4 patches first of all. So in this particular project, there are some 4 patches in the corner and some 4 patches in the center. And we've talked a little bit before about the 4 patch square up tool. This is the paperwork that comes with it. In the packaging, it includes the instructions for what you cut, how to trim down, and that sort of thing. But I did want to talk about, there are some patterns that include a 4 patch, and you can decide to make it oversized and trim it down. So these 2 4 patches need to be the same size. And I've already done some stitching, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Your instructions are for making the bigger sizes like this and then trimming down. So you can either do strip piecing, where you take a strip and another strip of color, whatever colors you need, put them face to face, stitch them, and cross cut, and then end up with a 4 patch. So I'm going to do that real quick. I think I'll do it with the blue because I think the blue may be just a little bit easier to see. So I've got blue and background. And then what I was going to say, you could also cut squares and just sew the squares together. I'm going to do just a real quick little strip set so you can see what I'm talking about. That is a very efficient way of stitching, getting your 4 patches. So I've got my machine ready, and I'm just buddying up the two strips. I'm going to sew down the long side, and I'm going to just do my best 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is oversized, so I'll have a little trimming room. If I did not want it oversized, then I would need to probably make some adjustments in the size strip you need for this particular block. So you're just going to stitch your two strips together. And you can make strip sets that are uneven sizes of strips or even sizes. This particular 4-patch is an even size strip. There is a technique called offset 4-patches that you can use, and that instruction sheet includes a technique sheet that you can use the same tool but have an offset strip set. So I've got my strips sewn together, and I'm going to press those, and I'm going to press toward the darker fabric. So let's go back over here. I'm going to move this so you can see. And we're going to just open this up. Now, if you are prone to pressing open, of course you could do that with this particular step, but I'm going to press toward my darker fabric, and I am just finger pressing a little bit as I go, just to make sure that my seam is laying the way I want it to lay. And that's just a real quick way of getting your seam locked down. Another thing that you want to be careful about when you're pressing a strip set, I'm going to turn this sideways so you can see basically the whole thing. You don't want to press a smile or a frown into your strip set. So if you start on this side, sometimes we have a tendency to kind of arc our iron, so you want to be real careful about that and just press and hold and move your iron across. Tony, bless you. Tony sneezed, could you tell? So we're going to just give it a quick little swipe with our acorn pressing pin, and that's the process for doing your strip set. Once you get that done, you're ready to cut this into chunks. So whatever size this strip was, that's how big you need to cut your cross cut. So this is 2 1/4 inches. So I'm just going to flip this over so you can see what I'm lining up to. And just about any kind of a tool that has your measuring lines, I can use this little strip set. So I've got my, I'm going to cut just a little wider than 2 1/4 inches, and I am lining up a horizontal line on my seam so that I end up with the right segment. So I'm trimming to 2 1/4 inches because that's what my original strip was, and I can work my way across my strip set, cutting 2 1/4 inch strips. Chunks, I guess is the best way to say that. Segments, maybe that's a better option. So I've got 4 of them cut. I would need 8 of them if I was going to make 4 of these. In this particular version, I had 2 this color, 2 with white and red, and 2 that were red and blue. So I've got my cross cuts, and I'm just going to buddy those up together. I'm going back to the sewing area so you can see what I need to cut for that. So here is my pair of segments. I'm going to back out just a little bit and give it time to focus. Come on, focus. Sometimes if it can focus on something close up, then it'll take over and focus everywhere. And it's kind of tilted somehow. There we go. That's a little straighter. So I've got my 2 segments of my strip set, and I'm going to buddy those up together and nest the seams there. That's where I pressed toward my darker fabric. So they nest nicely. Let me find a piece of a fabric tag to sew onto so that when I stitch onto my pair, I'm sewing off of my fabric tag onto my 2 segments. And here's another pair. I'm just going to flip it. I think I'll stitch through with the blue on top first, just like I did on the first one. If you tend to do the same thing with all of your segments, it makes my brain a little bit easier to determine what I'm doing and kind of keep myself organized better. By that, I mean I fed the blue fabric through the machine first with that on top. And I did the same thing with this one. It would have worked the other way. It's just easier to kind of keep yourself organized. So I'm going to just twizzle that. What I'm doing is taking out the 3 or 4 stitches here beyond my cross seam and the 3 or 4 stitches here. Usually I can just kind of insert my fingers in those little creases and twist. And when I get that opened, then those will lay down and it looks like a tiny little 4 patch on the back. That'll give you a flatter look on the front. So let's go to the overhead camera so you can see how to press, how to trim, and what comes next. So I have already twizzled in the center and give it a little finger press so I know the seams are going the way I want them to. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I've got it twizzled. Now I press from the front side of my fabric because I can see better whether I've got my seams going the way I want them to. And what happens when I don't press from the front side, I'm very likely to get a little tuck right here where it doesn't quite open up the seam the way I want it to. So that's why if you're pressing to one side like this, you're going to want to press from the front. And then this is where, if you're using the acorn pressing solution, give it a little swipe the direction that you just pressed. Set the iron on there and let the iron do the work. So in this block, I have 2 red and white, 2 blue and white, and 2 red and blue. So I've actually already trimmed the red and blue one. So let's talk about how I line up my 4-patch square up tool to be able to trim these to the proper size. Now you actually have other options as well. You could use your Tucker trimmer. It's not necessarily designed to get all of the seams lined up with a line on the ruler, but I can find the 3.5-inch center point. There it is right there. The only thing about using the Tucker trimmer to trim that, I almost have to kind of eyeball the straight lines and make sure that they are parallel to the seams to know if I'm really square and straight. The 4-patch square up tool has lines that are designed to find exactly the center point and to line up, let me move this out of the way so you can see, to line up vertical and horizontal lines. So I need to trim this to 3.5 inches. There's my 3.5-inch line, and there's the bottom. Where it lines up across, this is a 3-inch finished unit. It shows me where the center of that 3-inch finished unit is. Once I get this in place, this line will line up on the vertical seam. This line will line up on the horizontal seam. And see how easily I can line that up and get that in the right spot. Once I get that in place, the number 3, that's my finish size. That goes right on the center, and I trim up and over, and then I'm going to turn 180 degrees. Now this time the 3.5-inch trim up lines go on my cut edges. The 3 goes in the center, and I also have the horizontal and the vertical lines that line up with my seams. I just wiggled it, so let me get it right back in the right place. So once you get that in place and trim, then you can be assured that it's going to finish at 3 inches the way you need it to. So I had already trimmed the center, and a good test to determine whether you've trimmed it properly, if you have a plain square that it's going to stitch to, and after you trim this, it doesn't match that, something's wrong. You need to fix that. And then also you'll want to be aware of which way you have your red and blue lining up. It creates a little bit different look. And the way this fabric is, the red is fairly dark and it may be a little bit more difficult to see how that lines up. But you can see that it does make a difference if you put the red going in a chain across or the blue going in a chain across. So you have to determine which way you like it. That's your center section of this Stormy chain, because it does need to have a chain associated with it. So I've taken off all of the chain blocks, all of those 4 patches, and I've got just our diamond Rex units laying here because I want you to see those very clearly. We're going to talk about how you're going to do the diamond Rex tool and making those diamond Rex units. So first of all, I want you to notice that the diamond Rex units are a mirror image. I played with this the other day and I made 4 that are not a mirror image. So see what a difference that makes? If you don't have a mirror image, you're not going to get that same chain look that the blocks form otherwise. So let's just put this back here for just a second so you can see that. I'll put this one here the way it goes on this side. And you'll see why in a second. This one goes here. And I've got my red chain, my small chain going diagonally. Now at this point, I can either put a red one here. Let's put the red one up here. And put this one here. Put this one here. So that is one way of arranging those 4 patches to create a chain. Now watch as I make one switch with this center 4 patch. Do you see a chain now that goes all the way through the block? That will also affect how you want to assemble your block. I could also change this so that this goes through the block and creates a red chain all the way through the block. And that's fairly important when you're putting a bunch of these blocks together. So notice, since this is not a mirror image, what happens if I do make a mirror image of my diamond Rex? Notice the blues are meeting on the corner here and the whites are meeting on the corner here. That you may decide to go this way with your red 4 patches so it creates this little, almost a tulip shape of blue on the opposite corners and white on the opposite corners. So let's talk about how to get a mirror image of your diamond Rex units. So I'm going to lay 2 of them here so you can see what I'm talking about. Sometimes when they're in the block, it's not easily recognizable that it is a mirror image, but laying them this way, you do see that. So my first step is to cut the diamond shape. And you're going to start with a strip. And I've actually got a strip folded in half, or a double strip. Now I've lost my diamond Rex tool. There it is. I'm just going to move these up out of the way. With this angled side of the ruler, I can cut this diamond shape. And the way I do that is find the size I'm after, and I'm after a 3x6 center diamond. And it even tells me start with a 3 1/4 inch wide strip. Then I'm going to line up this window template on my strip. And I want to make sure that I accommodate this point right here. I don't want to be hanging off the end of my strip. And I can be assured that when I cut this, I'm going to have my whole strip. Now, a couple of things to consider. The center of my diamond Rex unit doesn't really have a right and a left direction. So I don't have to really worry about it. So I'm just going to cut my diamond shape. I'm going to turn around, and now I'm going to line up the 3x6 center diamond window template right on that strip, and I'm going to cut, and that gets rid of the part that I don't need. So I'm going to just move my strip over a little bit and put my diamond window template right on that diagonal cut that I just made. Line up this line on the bottom of the strip, and I have just a little excess up here. That's going to be trimmed off because I'm going to trim up the side to get the angle and across the top just to true up that diamond. So you're not getting rid of much, but that's just making this diamond the precise size. Now it is cut to size. It's not going to get trimmed down because I'm going to surround it with these triangle shapes. Those do get trimmed, but this is cut to size. So we're just going to lay those aside, and that's all I need for the 4 centers of my diamond Rex units. On my tool, on the other, on the same side, but it forms this kind of funny triangle shape. It tells me for a 3x6 finished unit, I need to start with 2 3/4 by 4-inch rectangles. So here's how I ended up with 4 matching. See, they're going the same direction. I would have to make sure that my rectangles were either face up or face down according to what I wanted to end up with. Notice that the angle of my white square, it's actually cream, but it follows the angle of my tool. So that means I would cut this triangle face up. So all of my cream colored fabrics would be face up. This triangle, in order to get the angle right, I would have to lay it face down. That's only if you need a mirror or a non-mirror image, because you want them all to go the same way. With what I'm making for this particular block, I do want a mirror image. So I've got some that need to lean left and some that need to lean right. And in order to do that, all I have to do is take my rectangles and leave them back to back in my stack. So I'll just do 2 of them at a time. I have 2 rectangles. They're back to back. And I'm going to lay those here. And then this window template, the 3x6 finished, is going to go on the edge. Once I get that in place, I'm going to make a cut. So I automatically have my mirror image. So here is my pair of triangles. This one's going to go here. This one's going here. This one's going on the top. And this one's going on the top. Something to remember about your rectangles, the flat part of this triangle that you're going to add, the replacement triangle on the side, that flat part goes in the middle of your diamond shape. So I have my pointy part at the tip and the flat part at the middle. So there are the 2 of them. So let's get the other 2. We're going to line them up because you're actually going to need 4 rectangles or 4 triangles per diamond Rex unit. So there's 2 more righties and 2 more lefties. Just because I kept them back to back, I'm going to do the same thing here, and I've actually got 4 stacked up back to back. Once I get them cut, I'll have everything I need for the triangles that go around my diamond shape. So let's take this over to the sewing area so I can stack it up and show you how I know where to sew. So this is all my pieces. I've got 8 triangles of blue and 8 triangles of cream, 4 diamonds that go in the center. So we're going to the sewing area. Any questions so far? I get a hello from St. Peters, Missouri, and a hello from Georgia. And I know that one of them's from Florida. So we're just from all over. All right, so this is my stack. Say that again. We talked about that earlier. She was talking about the patriotic book. Okay, so I want to make sure that when I put these triangles on here, I'm going to end up with a mirror image. And I can do that better with the blue, and I'll show you why. I'm going to need 2 units that have the triangle on the right top and the left bottom, but then I'll also need 2 units that are opposite. So let's start with this one. This is the triangle that goes on this side. I need one that's a matching triangle to go opposite. By matching, what I mean is if I could stack 2 of them on top of each other, they should be the same shape. And I'm just going to twist one around and they're going to be opposite each other. Here's the other one. This is going to go, this is why I use the blue one, because it's hard to see the colors of my cream colored, because the front and the back look the same, especially on the camera. It's sometimes difficult to tell even when I'm sitting here, so that's why I did that. So I have opposite sides here. So I'm just going to move this over a little bit. And I actually need 2 of these. So I'm going to stack up another one that's the same shape. I need another diamond in the middle. Then I'm going to find the appropriate triangle shape. And there are my 2 diamond shapes. Now I'm going to let me grab my little sheet here, and I'm going to put the other one on top. So there's my diamond. And now my replacement triangles, those side triangles, let me flip this over, are going to go on the opposite sides. And I'll show you both of them here in a minute so you can see what I'm talking about. So there's the pointy ends go on the tips. The flat part goes in the middle of your diamond shape. And I need another pair. Okay, so there's 2, and there's 2 that are a mirror image. See that? So you want to make sure that you lay yours out where it looks like a mirror image before you start sewing. It'll save you a headache later. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my center diamond, and I'm going to flip it over and sew the left top on first. I'm going to match up the points to the point. I'm going to come over here to the needle. So I'm matching up point to point, and I let this bottom part, the flat part, just kind of float and hang off the bottom. Wherever it ends up, it's going to have a little ear sticking under there, and that's fine because that gives me the wiggle room I need later when I'm actually trimming. So I'm going to stitch to the diamond shape. Remember, the diamond is cut to size, so that's the reason I want it on top next to my presser foot so I can see it. I want to align the edges, but the top of what is next to the presser foot is easier to tell whether I have it lined up properly. So that's why I want to make sure that what I can see is what is cut to size and it's not going to get trimmed down. So there's the 2 diamond Rex units that I started with. And I'm going to flip this over. Now I'm going to need to sew the opposite side on. And I find it easiest to just flip it over. I still have this diamond shape on top. Match up the points, the tips, and then the little flat part's going to hang off the bottom, right there at the bottom, on the middle part of the diamond shape. And I'll just line that up. And I often kind of play this piggyback thing with my units where I trim and leave the second one in the needle. And it serves as my fabric tag so that I always have a little piece of fabric in the machine that I'm sewing off of. So if I do them 2 at a time, that makes it easier. So I'm just going to park my needle in a fabric tag so I can show you real quickly how that turned out. So I want to press toward the triangle, but you want to be extra careful because this is a long bias seam and you don't want to stretch anything out of shape. So I'm just doing little short creases with my fingernail. And once I get that done, I'm ready to stitch on the other triangle that goes here. So I'm again going to match up the points, the tips, and this flat part hangs off down toward the middle of my diamond, but I'm going to flip it over because I still want to stitch with my diamond on top. I just find that I have better results if I can see that center diamond. If you remember how the square squared tool works, where you see the square in the center of the square squared tool is the part that doesn't get trimmed down, it's cut to size, and you get better results if you stitch with the square on top. I'm doing the same thing here, except my shape this time is a diamond, not a square. So I'm just gonna give this a little finger crease, turn around and do the opposite side. And even if you're not doing a two color version where you have blue on one, two corners and white on the other corner, you have to sew opposite corners. That's just going to make your life easier. So this is the one that goes here. I'm going to flip it over. The points match up. The flat part just hangs off the end of the seam. And it just kind of crisscrosses there in the middle of the diamond. I'm just going to let it stitch under there. And I'm lining up, I'm aligning to the diamond shape. And I'm using the side of my presser foot as my guide to stitch through. And let's grab this one. And here's my last one. I'm doing the opposite, or not the last one, the next to the last one. I'm doing the opposite side that I just did. I'm going to flip it over because I want to be able to see my diamond shape on top, match up the points, and align that seam. And I'm going to just start stitching here in the middle of my diamond. And I just get 2 or 3 stitches in. If you have your needle in the down position where every time it stops, the needle stops in the down position, you can control it better. Because when you stop to adjust your fabric and your needle is in the down position, it holds your place better and you don't have as many issues with your fabric moving around on you while you're adjusting. So here's my last seam on this particular version of my diamond Rex. I'm going to match up the pointy ends here and let the flat part just fall where it falls. Match up here first. If you feel the need to pin, here's where I would pin, right up here at the tip. I tend not to pin on this particular step, but you may prefer that. And I'm holding down back here so I can get this underneath my needle without flipping that triangle on the bottom. Once I get it in place and I have 2 or 3 stitches where I'm holding my place with my needle, a lot of times if I pinned, I remove my pin so I can manipulate the fabric better. So there are 2 diamond Rex units, and they are both, let me finger press toward the triangle again. These are both going the same direction. They are not a mirror image. So you can see that. And I just stacked them up that way so that when I stitched, they would be the ones that match. Now the mirror image ones are on my board here. So let's sew one of them really quickly. I'm going to pick up my diamond, match up the tips, pin if you want to, and then we're going to stitch starting at the point. This is a really important place to use a fabric tag to sew off of, because if your machine has a tendency to eat the points of a seam, this is where that would happen because you've got a nice sharp point. It's just as easy to do both of them. So let's just match up the tips and align that seam and adjust as you go. So I'm going to do the opposite corner, but I'm going to match up the tips. Let the flat part just fall where it falls. Stitch off of your fabric tag or the unit that went through your needle first. You can see how easy it is to just kind of piggyback onto when you're assembly line piecing or chain piecing. Right there is what I'm guiding from and making sure that I'm aligning that. Now I'm going to finger press back toward the triangle. And of course, you do not have to use the color combination that I've used. I've used a dark blue, a light blue, or a medium blue, and a cream for this. So this one goes here. I'm going to flip it over, but I'm going to stitch from the side where the diamond is so I can see. And I'm going to start right here at the bottom. And I'm aligning with the diamond shape. The triangles are going to get trimmed. The diamond is already the size it needs to stay. And notice I'm just finger pressing as I go. If you were doing 100 of these, you might be tempted to get up and go to the iron. But I will say sometimes I'm better off if I don't use the iron on my unit till I've got all of my triangles surrounding that center diamond, because you do have some bias issues if you're not careful. So I'm ready to slide that under. And one more triangle on this unit. And I had already finger pressed it, so the seams are going the way I need it to go, but I want to stitch from this side where the diamond is. Line up the tips. Let the flat part just float where it's going to end up. And one more triangle. I'm going to flip it over. The points, the point of the diamond and the point of the triangle are going to match up. And I'm being careful not to pull and stretch on this long side of my diamond shape, because that is a bias edge. I can distort that where it will never be straight again, because they don't have real good memory if I stretch that bias edge out of shape. Okay, so I've got all 4 of my diamond Rex units. Let's take this to the overhead so you can see how you press it and how you trim it. Be sure if you have questions to just stick them on the comments, because Tony's monitoring for us. So I have 2 with the blue on the top right, and I have 2 with the blue on the top left. So I'm going to finger press this, just line it up, give it a little finger press just to make sure the seams go the way I want them to go, and then set the iron on it, let the iron do the work, and while it's heating, I can flip this and finger press the next one. And I can do that with all 4 of them. I had already finger pressed this one when I was setting at the machine. So I can slide my iron on. And if you're going to use the acorn pressing solution, now's the time to grab it. And I did not come to the iron before I got all 4 on, so I can go all the way around, set the iron on there, and let it be heating while I get the next one ready. And I stack them like this so that they actually get a little extra time under the iron. This particular iron is cordless, so it doesn't stay at the highest temperature for a real long time. So I often will have to, if I was doing a bunch of these, I'd have to set it back on the dock and let it heat back up before I'd be ready to do a whole bunch of them. But just 4 of them, I can get all 4 of them pressed and acorn pressed and then get them ready to trim. So I'm going to trim this to 3.5 by 6.5. And you're going to be using the flat, the 90-degree corner, the opposite side of the angled corner that I use to cut my diamonds and my triangles. So I am right-handed. I'm going to be placing my diamond Rex unit vertically, and my lines on my ruler line up with the seams here. If you're left-handed, simply turn your unit left horizontally and line up the corner to match up with those seams. Once I get this in place, I'm going to be looking for all the X's on the 3 by 6 inch unit. And it also right here on the X's on the top and the right side say 3 by 6, 3 by 6. This X and this X do not say anything. But I have the 3.5 by 6.5 inch lines right here that tell me that's the size I'm actually trimming to. So I'm going to put the 3 by 6 X here and here on the top and the right side. Then I'm just going to tweak it so that the other 2 X's, the ones that don't have a particular number attached to them, they're going to line up, but I know they're the proper one because my 3 by 6 numbers are already at the top and the right side. Then I'm going to lift and turn 180 degrees. Now the 3.5 by 6.5 inch line goes on the bottom and the left side. I'm also going to, again, find the X's. They should be on those intersections, and the X's that didn't have a number will line up. If your X's don't line up pretty close, you may need to check your stitching, because generally that means your seam allowance is not correct. And remember, the center diamond is cut to size. You're just adding an oversized triangle so that you can trim it up later. So these are the 2 that match each other. They're the same direction. Line up the 3 by 6 at the top and the right side. And then I'm going to turn 180 degrees and line up the 3.5 by 6.5. You're working all the time with finished sizes and unfinished sizes. So the finished size of this unit is 3 by 6. That means I need that extra 1/2 inch to trim that to get it to be the size I need. I'm going to trim one more so you can see what that looks like. Find the 3 by 6 X's. That's my finished size. And it even says that right here. Finished size units, finished size units. I'm going to turn 180 degrees, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm still on the 3 by 6 finished size intersections, and the 3.5 by 6.5, that's my extra 1/2 inch for my seam allowances, are on the last side. So that is a mirror image. Notice that they're opposite each other, and that's what I need for this particular block. I need the mirror image. Now, of course, you can put your pieces together, because we're just playing with shapes. You can put your shapes together any way you want to. And on your cutting guide, it describes which pieces that you cut will line up with which part of the block. So there's my mirror image units that I need for this particular block. I'm going to move it down a little bit so you can see it. Now, I did play with EQ8 to show you how you could assemble these blocks, a bunch of these blocks, together to make an interesting project. So this is just the same project you saw. The color combinations I've used may be a little bit different, but it's still a mirror image unit. The blocks, when they come together, create a really kind of a crazy look, but you can do all kinds of things with these shapes. And of course, if you added sashing to it, that would completely change the look, but there are several things you can do this with these blocks. So if you are making one of the blockbuster blocks and you find a block you really enjoy making, make several of them and make a little project out of them just for a table topper or a little throw quilt or even a charity quilt, just to give yourself some practice making the blocks and using the tools. So if there are questions, be sure and let us know. Okay, B from Tennessee. Um, if you will message me your email address, I'll add you to our email group. The patterns and the cutting instructions are available in our, oh my goodness, I've just lost it, a Google Drive that I save all of the project instructions. So I'll add you to the email group that I send every day. So by the way, if you didn't get to watch us live, you can watch later either on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. So be sure and like us and share it, and that kind of helps everybody else see it as well. So come by and see us. We have several new bolts of fabric today. I didn't share that, but we get new fabric every week. So be sure and keep up with the things we're adding. So we'll see you next week live at 5.